I'm Jim Czek. You're watching Now Media with me, Scott Dedels, and we're here with the Bitcoin Show. What's going on, Scott, in the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, today was some really big news. It's been kind of no news for a long time since the Trump inauguration and different ideas around Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. But strategy chairman Michael Saylor today is now pitching a Bitcoin, the foundation for a national Bitcoin Strategic Reserve for the U.S. federal government between $16 and $81 trillion. And
Wow.
to put that in perspective, the entire market cap of Bitcoin today is something like somewhere between 2 and 3 trillion US dollars. So if the US alone were to buy $16 trillion worth of Bitcoin, this is an experiment on something that's never happened before. We have this thing that can be bought where there's an inelastic relationship between the supply and demand, and $16 trillion of new inflow. If nobody else was to buy any Bitcoin at all, you're talking about like a $1 million Bitcoin right there, without any other countries or any other companies or any other individuals buying along the way. So we could be headed into some unprecedented times. We were talking about this on the last show, but rate cuts are driving people towards hard assets, and I think that the stage is really set potentially for a really explosive run on Bitcoin. And this news of Saylor right now is more fuel for the fire.
Yeah, and I've had people like today alone, which is interesting, and I used to do this for mining stocks. Today alone come to me and say, hey, Jim, Bitcoin's expensive, but a friend of mine told me that I should buy these shit coins. And there's
Yeah.
two people came to me, and I'm just like, I said, no. Like, you don't own any Bitcoin, and you want to buy these other coins because, somebody's selling you a story. And they're just like, what do you mean? I'm just like, they told you a story, didn't they? They told you a story of how it's going to be amazing. Just like, but it's just, that's the typical old mining stock pump and dump as well, right? Like, and it's called closeology. In mining stocks, you have a company that actually found a deposit, like this massive company, and the stock goes from like $1 to 1,000, and then so people buy mining or properties all around this property, and then they talk up a story. Whereas the one that you want to own is the one that has the asset, right? You know what I mean?
And there's a couple things there that I think are really common, places where people go wrong with Bitcoin, and one of them is another way you're describing is unit bias. And so it's this idea that Bitcoin's 100,000 and some other gem coin is $1, and so if you can buy 10 of them instead of 10 Bitcoin, you're doing better, which just totally isn't true, because there is really Bitcoin, and then there's a bunch of other things that are, like I said, they're land that's close to the real deposit, but that's about all they have in common. Yeah. The other thing I think that people get wrong, I know that people get wrong with Bitcoin all the time, is the idea that because it's near its all-time price high now, that the price is high. And, it's higher than it used to be, for sure. And that's true of everybody who's bought Bitcoin along the way, as it's been going up for the last 15 years. It's always higher than it was before, but it can go a lot higher. And I have friends telling me they're buying other coins because they don't think you can actually get rich with Bitcoin, and they just have fundamentally misunderstood what Bitcoin is and how much bigger it can go. So if you 10x your money on anything else, you would be thrilled. Like, this is something that's pretty rare in stocks, or takes a really long time. Bitcoin hitting an 18 trillion market cap, it would still be smaller than gold as an asset class if it did that. And there's all kinds of we've talked about this on other episodes, but the fine art market is another sort of 20 trillion. There's over $330 trillion globally in real estate. You're not talking about stocks, debt. There's a lot of different places where trillions of dollars could flow into Bitcoin from here. And there is no rule that says Bitcoin has a theoretical market cap. These things kind of level off as the market decides how valuable things are compared to other things, but we have no way of knowing what that ceiling is for Bitcoin. And I said this before, I believe it. I think $1 million of Bitcoin is a very easy thing to occur. I actually think $10 million per Bitcoin is a very easy thing to occur. And the issue is, for other people who think that piece sounds crazy, is they don't understand that we're also headed for $25 cups of coffee. And when Bitcoin does hit $10 million, $10 million just won't be worth nearly what we think of $10 million as being worth now. And that'll certainly be true in Canada, as the rate cuts here are bad. The budget that is about to be rolled out by Carney and the Liberals is bad. There is going to be, I'm concerned about the future of the Canadian dollar. And the Bitcoin price is different in every currency, but the exchange rate between the loonie and the Bitcoin, I think, is about to get a lot worse.
Yeah, and the other way that I would look at it is speculation versus an asset class, and I would, I can make the argument that Bitcoin was definitely a speculation, back, 5, 6, 7 years ago. But as soon as some of the funds and some of the big investment banks started picking up on it, and then, there's talk of, if the U.S. government uses a strategic reserve, it's gone from speculation to an asset class, right? And I would even argue to say right now it's an asset class as opposed to speculation. And the ones that the closology plays, I don't know, whatever you want to call these other coins, meme, Doge, Ripple, all these
lottery
other
tickets.
What's that? Yeah, they're speculations. They're speculations, right? And what they used to call, and I'm bringing some of the old mining analogy, they're called burning matches, right? And so I have this burning match in my hand, and I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to tell you how beautiful this match is. It's on fire, and then I hand it to you, and then you look at it, and you pass it to the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy. Last guy holding the match gets burnt, right? And that's the old mining stock game, right? And they're speculations. So again, if you want to speculate, put some of your money into speculation for sure. And then I said to some people that are starting out, just like, don't buy speculations as your first thing in the stock market or any kind of asset class, because you probably get burnt, and then you won't want to invest anymore, and you punish yourself for the rest of your life, right? Buy assets in the first bit, right? And you want to buy assets, and you want to diversify a bit so that you're not going to get punished if things go bad, right? So I would say, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, and to take your point a step further, right? I think buying some Bitcoin is an insurance policy on what appears to be right, continuing to be right. So if there's, there has been strong signals that the U.S. government is going to do something, and it seems like those signals are getting stronger. And if the U.S. government does end up buying a significant amount of Bitcoin, then that's probably something you would want to be, participating in. And it's looking more likely than not right now. And so I think that, whereas the other stuff, like you're talking about, it's like, this is stuff where, you're hoping to be that somebody else is going to come in after you, and they'll be your exit liquidity. And, yeah, exactly.
The burning match, just say, here, you can hold this.
Yeah, totally. It's like they're just completely different things. And I think the thing about Bitcoin is the longer it goes on, the narrative actually gains strength and becomes, more reasonable. So there was a long time where people thought the same thing was true of Bitcoin, and it was, these kind of no intrinsic value. It's a greater fool theory, right? And it's not the greater fool theory.
I made those arguments myself, right? You and I first started out.
So.
And that gold versus Bitcoin. I made those arguments myself, but I did post something that I think is really relative on LinkedIn recently, and it is the kind of where the Canadian government is. We sold all the gold, our reserve currency. We sold all of our gold in the Bank of Canada. I think it was 2015 was the last of it, and we've been selling most of it. We'd have it worth about $118 billion if they would have hung on to it today, which we could have used right now. Because they said that there was no value to gold, that it was a relic of an asset. And at the same time, around 2010, central banks were net sellers for a long time too, because there's a lot of people that believed in that monetary policy, that gold was a relic. And then all of a sudden, it shifted, and in 2010, central banks have been net buyers of gold for quite a while, and it's ramped up, and you see that in the price of gold, right? And it's it's a reserve currency for a lot of banks other than the Bank of Canada. And the other thing the Bank of Canada doesn't like is Bitcoin, which is, you know what I mean? The Canadian government doesn't like Bitcoin either as a reserve currency, but they do like the US dollar, because the majority of our reserve currency is in UST bills. which is in a government that a government that attacks the U.S. government, just makes no sense at all to me. Which, if you're the guy that used to be the Bank of Canada governor, the only asset you have is the asset you're attacking, which makes no sense to me. But the floor that gets put in, though, and where all of a sudden Bitcoin goes from a speculation to an asset is when, like the JP Morgans and all those other places start accumulating and putting their clients into it, and also the ETFs, because now it's under SEC regulations and all that stuff. And then, the administration very friendly to it, and a bunch of other governments looking at it. I mean, it becomes an asset. And then also, if you look at the technical trading pattern right now, and I'm a technical kind of guy from way back when I used to run a thing called Canadian Market Watch. And if you look at the chart of Bitcoin now, the fluctuations aren't as volatile anymore, and that's what happens when it becomes a real asset. And it's kind of like getting the trading bands get tighter and tighter and tighter, and then there'll be big steps up. Like when if it becomes a strategic reserve, it'll be an order of magnitude where it'll move up, right? Just like the election, and then you'll see these things, and it'll kind of tighten up its trading pattern, right? So, and that's what you're seeing right now. Like the floor seems pretty solid. And you and I have talked about this is where your business comes into play. Not that this is a direct plug, but this is where it comes into play, because what you want to do on stuff like this, when Inco was a small thing, boys, all these stocks and that, is you want a dollar cost average if you're interested in, right? Because then you're not worried about whether it's 116 today, 110 tomorrow, 150 the next day, and 106, and because then you just dollar cost average in. Because if you're in it for the long haul, like in an asset, it doesn't really matter, right? Because over time, you just put monthly contributions in, and that's what your company kind of does, right? You allow people to do payroll contributions, which is a nice and an easy way to dollar cost average into an asset class.
Yeah, I mean, and people can really stress out about trying to time the market perfectly, which you're never going to do anyways. And I think, with Bitcoin, if the thesis is right, and let's say just Bitcoin is only going to get to $1 million, and people are worried about whether they're buying it for 116 or 114, this is really a long-term thing. This is like you're saying, this is a monetization of an asset class. It's probably going to play out, as others believe, probably over the next sort of 8 years. So 2034 is the moment in time where 99.9% of all of the Bitcoin have been mined. So at that point, there's sort of an exponentially decreasing amount that will be circulated newly into the system until 2140, which is the termination point of new Bitcoin. So how it works, Bitcoin miners produce a Bitcoin block roughly every 10 minutes, and that block has associated with it what's called a block reward, which is the namesake of our company. And every 4 years, the predictable amount of Bitcoin associated with a block decreases by 50%. And this is how Bitcoin's been working since the inception. And so right now, I believe the number is 450 Bitcoin per day globally are produced as a part of blocks that where the block reward is a little bit over 3 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And in 2028, that number will drop to one and change. And then in 2032, it will be less than 1. And so as this is happening, there's sort of like a reverse. It's like screwing something in from both directions. So the newly mined and circulating Bitcoin is decreasing over time, while the new buyers is growing. And this is what the phenomena that you're talking about, changing the floor of the price. So Strategy, the company, bought another, I think it was 600 million of Bitcoin this week, and they're not planning to sell ever. So these are Bitcoins that are being removed from the the circulating supply that's available on exchanges, and this is a sort of a gradual tightening, which is grinding that price up higher as supply outpaces demand, and the new supply is diminishing over time.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I can go through a ton of mining stocks, and I can give you an example of even a stock called Tesla, which is, to me, one of the most important stocks in the world right now, based on what it does. And people will say it's overvalued and all that kind of stuff, but if you look at its potential going forward, it could be, it could be so undervalued, right? I mean, it depends on how you look at things, right? And if you look at like what you just said about Bitcoin, if it becomes a strategic asset of the United States government, imagine what it would be for other nations, because the United States, again, leads the world. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, so part of what Saylor is discussing with this idea of initiating a strategic reserve is that as Bitcoin continues to appreciate over time, it creates a new way to change the debt ratio and potentially get the US out of debt. I think that if that were something that other countries thought was happening, that they might try to buy Bitcoin and do the same thing. And Bitcoin theorists have believed for a long time that we're headed towards something called a Bitcoin standard, which would be sort of a 21st century version of the gold standard, where money used to be more closely tied to, or even actually, precious metals itself. And when that was true, inflation rates were much lower over longer periods of time, and the prices of stuff was a lot more reliable and predictable, that's how money's supposed to work. When money retains its value over longer periods of time, there's more certainty about how things should cost. And we're actually seeing we're seeing the complete opposite in Canada right now, where it's like $12 for a pint of raspberries. And the reason is because 40% of the Canadian dollars that exist today were created in the last 4 years. And so, Bitcoin's inflation rate right now of new Bitcoins being introduced into the system is like less than 1%, 0.8%, I think is the number. And the Canadian dollar is expanding at 10%. Could be higher. It's hard to measure that number.
Wait for November 4th.
Exactly. Totally.
Wait for November 4th and see what happens.
Yeah, so we could be moving into a place where countries end up having to sort of peg their currency to Bitcoin or gold or both in some way that the market just demands that this experiment we've been living in over the past 50 years since Richard Nixon ended the redemption of gold in 1971. And since that time, money's really just been based on the belief in money. And this is why, a house in Canada was $20,000 50 years ago, and now it's $1 million. It's not because houses are 50 times more valuable today than they were. It's because our money has lost 90% of its value in that time because they've yeah.
And then just for people, like the central banks actually have a set inflationary target. Do you know what I mean? They actually intentionally inflate dollars. That's an intention. That's an actual intention. They say that rate's 2%, but we know that it's higher. But they intend to do that, right? Because the idea is to inflate assets, right? That's the idea behind it, right? So,
the system's not broken; it's working perfectly. Yeah. Actually, this is kind of a headline in the Bitcoin world. I don't know if it was this week or last week, but the Bank of Canada on their official website removed the tagline to say that their stated mission was to keep inflation between 2% and 3%, and they sort of rebranded. And now the Bank of Canada website just says something like they're more than a bank, and so. This is the kind of transparency, opacity, clarity that we've come to expect from our highest institutions in this country, and inspiring leadership from the Bank of Canada.
They should put on there. They should say, the only G7 nation without any gold in reserve. The only G7 nation. Do you know what I mean? Just like making decisions that nobody else will.
Yeah, totally. I mean, these are for individual people. I think it's the way to protect yourself from the 100% certainty of increasing inflation over time is to own hard assets. And we've talked about this to death, but Bitcoin and gold are two of the hardest ones.
And you've got a meeting. We'll wrap this up. But if you want to buy a coin for 10 cents, Scott and I will sell you one. Just tell us how much you need and how much you want to pay. And we'll sell you as much as you need.
You're going to be investigated for securities fraud there.
There's an endless supply of them. Just say that, right? Just an endless supply. We're only kidding, right? So, but that's what you're getting with the other ones. They kind of make it up. Like, two guys in the back room decide that they're going to flood out this coin that has an endless supply. And then and then somebody says, hey, we got another order. Just like, great. Print some more certs up, right? We got to get these out.
No, and they own it all, and so as you buy it, they're selling it directly to you.
Well, hey, direct to seller. That seems like a good model, right?
It's a great business model.
Anyway, Block Rewards, tell us how that works. You're the sponsor of the show. Let us know what's going on there.
Yeah, we are the easiest way to incorporate Bitcoin into your compensation and rewards. So our launch product is called Bitcoin Savings Plan, and it works like a group RSP. Set your employees up to convert some of their net pay at source into Bitcoin, or offer a reward or a match as an employer as a way to differentiate yourself, as a way to recruit and retain staff, or appeal to staff that might not be as interested in more traditional programs or assets. This is sort of what we think of as being a recruitment and retention tool for the next generation.
Yeah, and it's a way for people to dollar cost average into an asset class that they may not otherwise, buy, because it's sometimes, even the purchasing. Lots of people like that easier way, like RSPs, right? It just goes into an account and it gets invested or whatever, right? Similar type thing, right? So.
Exactly right. Yeah, super easy to set up. And so we can be found at blockrewards.ca. If you work somewhere and you want to be paid in Bitcoin, send us your employer. If you run a company and you're interested to learn more, we'd love to hook you up for a demo.
And just as a qualifier or disclaimer, we don't give out investment advice. You make your own investment decisions. Yeah, go find a broker. They'll make you broker, right? I'm with the comedy again, right? But anyway, lots to do. It's interesting, though. Interesting world. And the more you can learn, the better you're off, right? The better off you're going to be. So educate yourself.
Yes. Spend the time right now. It's never been more important than today.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for watching Now Media.